Hi guys, there's a handout in the week 5 folder called Inversions of 1 and 5. You're going to need that and a pencil, and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, the main question that we are answering today is what can you do when you only have tonic and dominant harmonies to work with to make the music a little more interesting? Specifically, are there any ways that we can manipulate those harmonies so that we get a more interesting bass line? The answer to that obviously is yes. And we are going to be focusing on what happens when we use the first inversion of tonic and dominant. So the 1-6 and the 5-6. Let's take a look at this Brahms excerpt that I have here. I'm just going to play the piano part. So we're in A minor. And I'm just going to play through the accompaniment. Give it a listen. Now, if we were to look at that and listen, we would say that the steady rhythm is the quarter note. We're going to learn a couple new terms today, and that first term is going to be surface rhythm. Now, when we talk about surface rhythm, we're talking literally about the rhythm that is on the musical surface, the rhythm that we are most likely to hear. In this case, we've got this quarter note pulse. There's another type of rhythm that is really important in this music that we're looking at, and that is called the harmonic rhythm. Now, the harmonic rhythm tells us how often the harmony is changing. A lot of times the harmonic rhythm and the surface rhythm are different, and we are going to see that with this particular piece. I'm going to play this again, and I'd like you to grab your pencil and start working through what you think might be a good Roman numeral analysis of this excerpt. Now, if we were to go ahead and analyze this, which we are going to do now, we're in A minor. Normally, we anticipate that a piece is going to begin on a nice, strong root position tonic triad. This song is a little different, though. Instead of it beginning on a tonic triad in root position, we see that we actually start on a tonic triad in the first inversion. So we have A, C, E, but C is in the bass. And then in beat 2, that first inversion triad becomes a root position triad. Now let's keep looking forward. We have the leading tone in the bass on the next beat, and that gives us a dominant in first inversion. And again, that first inversion triad moves to root position. That gives us this really nice descending bass line, right? So 4 different bass pitches, all descending, but we've really only got 2 harmonies. We are just inverting those 2 harmonies to give us some more variety. And then after our 5 chord, we go back to, this time, a root position tonic to 1-6 and then 5. And that gives us this nice rising bass line to contrast the descent in the beginning. Now let's revisit this idea of harmonic rhythm. Our surface rhythm is the quarter note, but our harmonic rhythm is actually half of that. We really only change harmonies every 2 beats. Yes, we change inversions of the harmony, but that first measure is still all tonic. We've just moved the bass around. The second measure is still all dominant. So our harmonic rhythm is actually at the half note. because the surface rhythm is dealing with inversions of the triad. So it expands our time in both tonic and dominant while giving us new bass notes. Let's take a look at this Haydn example. I'm going to play a recording for you, and I want you to listen and also follow your score and take note of what's happening in the bass and think about harmonically what we have going on. I'll play it again. Okay, so we didn't have a lot of variety in the harmony, but the bass line did move every measure. Let's take a look at what we have going on. We're in A major. We start out with a root position tonic chord. So nice one chord. And then your bass going from here to here. So our bass went from 1 to 7, 1 to the leading tone. And if you take inventory of the rest of the notes in that triad, you get a nice 5, 6. And then measures 3 and 4 actually repeat the same exact pattern. There's one tiny change in measure 4, and that comes from your right hand note. We've added, so now we've gone from this harmony to that harmony. So we've added a 7th to our 5. This is more so a topic for Wednesday in versions of the 5/7, but we have one here, so we're going to go with it. And then back to 1. So let's think about how this is different from the Brahms. The Brahms saw us go from one inversion to the other of the same harmony. So tonic first inversion to tonic root, dominant first inversion, dominant root. We expanded our time in the tonic and dominant by cycling through root position and first inversion. This one's a little bit different. We go from tonic to 5/6, back to tonic, back to 5/6/5, and back to tonic. Our bass line is really, it's like a slow trill, right? We're just going from 1 to 7 and then back to 1. Taking a look at this entire phrase, so we've got this 4-bar phrase, ends on the downbeat of bar 5. We start on tonic, we end on tonic. In the middle, we really don't go anywhere, right? We're kind of stagnant. We go to the dominant, but then we go back. And then we go to the dominant again, and then we go back. And we've got this kind of sandwich action with tonic, and the dominant just stuck in there as like a lower neighbor tone or a lower neighbor chord. We go from here to here, but then back to here, and then here, and then back to here. This is another new term for the day. We're going to talk a little bit about this idea of prolongation. When you prolong something, you just extend it, right? You make it last longer, you expand it. In this instance, these 5/6s and the 5/6 and the 5/6/5 are acting as a way to prolong tonic. So this entire passage from here to here, our harmonic movement is basically 0. We start on tonic, we end on tonic. We don't do anything really in the middle but embellish tonic with that lower neighbor harmony. So this entire passage is an example of what we would call tonic prolongation. We are prolonging tonic for several bars by using the 5/6 as a lower neighbor. Okay, let's go ahead and construct some of these. What you have in front of you is a model, so a little model composition that goes through the inversions of 1, the inversions of 5, and then there's one where you're going to get in there and play. Let's take a look at the model composition. I want to point out a few things that you might or might not be able to replicate when you do this on your own. The first thing is when we go from 1 to 1, 6 in that first bar. So we start out here, there's our opening tonic. Now I'm just going to play the outer voices. What happens, so we get scale degree 3 in the soprano, scale degree 1 in the bass, and then they actually trade. And we get scale degree 3 in the bass and scale degree 1 in the soprano in the next harmony. We talked about this a little bit in counterpoint too. This idea of voice exchange. We spoke about it in terms of maybe doing a voice exchange in first species with your contus and your counterpoint. Now we're seeing it in the context of this harmonic progression, using a voice exchange between the soprano and the bass when moving from 1 to 1, 6 or vice versa. Now let's talk doubling, especially in terms of the 5 chord. Now we know that we always want to try and double the root. If we can't double the root, doubling the 5th is the next best option. With the 5 chord, there's one pitch you cannot double, and that is the leading tone, which is the 3rd of the chord. The reason I mention that is when you have a 5-6, your leading tone is in the bass. Since you can't double it, that means it can't be anywhere else. So you can have no other leading tones in that chord. Now you can see that it would have been really easy to keep that pitch in the soprano, right? Because it was already there from the previous chord. But since you can't double the leading tone, the soprano had to jump down to the A. And that gives us a doubled root, which is great. And you can see the soprano and alto actually meet. So they meet on the same pitch. That's why it's double stemmed like that. Can't cross voices, but you can share. So your alto and soprano meet on that A. And then just a regular old cadence to 2-1. Okay, I want you to try one. So you have something similar to the model in the 3 bars afterwards. You start on a 1-6 rather than a 1. I've given you the outer voices. I'd like you to come up with the inner voices for me. So keeping in mind good doubling, not doubling the leading tone. No 7ths on your 5 chords. So these are all just a 5. No 7ths until we say there are 7ths. In this case, there are none. Put the video on pause, work this out, and then when you come back, I'll have my answer up and we can talk through some common pitfalls. Okay? All right, let's see what you have and how it compares to what I've got up here. A couple of things to note. We still have a voice exchange. You had nothing to do with that. That was just the way the soprano and bass were written. But those first 2 harmonies do still have a voice exchange. Your 5-6, it is potentially quite tempting to move that tenor down to C sharp, but you cannot because your 5-6 can only have one leading tone and it's already in the bass, so your tenor has to be on E for that harmony. What ends up happening then is you get a doubling that maybe is not our favorite, right? You end up with a doubled 5th. That's totally fine. In general, voice leading rules and spelling rules, like don't double the leading tone, are by far more important than doubling rules. Doubling is more of a preference in terms of, you know, do we want to double the root? Do we want to double the 5th? Those are preferential. Not doubling the leading tone is a rule. You can't mess with that one. But having a doubled 5th is not incorrect. It's just not what we strive for. Doubled root is preferable, but a doubled leading tone is just not allowed. So this is our other option that we get. And then we go just to a 5, and in fact, nobody has to do anything in the inner voices because the soprano moves down to the leading tone. So since the leading tone is in the soprano, you cannot have it in any of your inner voices. And then our cadence to 1. Now, I'm going to guess that maybe some of you had this for a final harmony, because it actually does maintain the oblique motion in the alto, which is something we talk about a lot, and the tenor is still moving by step, just in another direction and to the third. Now, if you had D and A and then D and D, that is incorrect because we need a third. So if that's what you had, we need to fix that because we absolutely need a third in that triad. But if you had what I have with the blue notes, I'm going to talk about why that is maybe not as preferable, but as it's notated, it's not incorrect. Looking at what we have with the blue notes, you have a soprano that's going up. You have an alto that's staying the same. You have a tenor that's going up, and you have a bass that's going up. We like to move as much as we can opposite the bass, and that's simply for variety. If you remember from counterpoint, contrary motion was your best friend, right? You're never going to go wrong with contrary motion. Similarly, the purple notes, so the ones that I sketched in originally, we've got a little bit of contrary motion with the inner voices. So the soprano is still going up, bass is going up, but those inner voices are moving contrarily to that. Maybe a little bit more preferable, but like I said, the blue notes are not incorrect. So if you have those blue notes, you are absolutely fine. The big thing is that you didn't double the leading tone on any of your 5 chords, and that you didn't have a 7th on your 5 chord because there's no 7 in the figure. Okay, in class on Wednesday, we are going to go ahead and tackle inversions of the 5/7, which we saw a preview of in the Haydn. But if you have any questions, come on into office hours and ask away. Otherwise, I will see you guys in class on Wednesday.